What if the moment you walked onto a plane, someone decided your worth before you even sat down, not because of your manners, not because of your ticket, but because of your skin? That's what happened to Naomi Brooks, a 7 months pregnant black woman on a routine flight from Atlanta to Seattle. What should have been a quiet morning in first class turned into a scene no passenger could forget, a flight attendant's prejudice exploding into violence before the whole cabin. Now, imagine it was you. You've worked hard, earned your place, paid your dues, and then, in front of strangers, someone tells you, you don't belong here. Would you stay calm? Would you walk away? Or would you find a way to rise above the hate? This story isn't about outrage, it's about response. About how one woman's calm courage and quiet dignity changed not just one flight, but an entire industry. Because sometimes the most powerful revolution begins in silence and ends with justice. Stay with us and discover how Naomi Brooks turned humiliation into history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more stories like this can keep flying. The soft hum of the terminal speakers filled Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. It was early morning. A pale gray light spilled across the polished floors, reflecting the rush of suitcases, coffee cups, and tired faces. Naomi Brooks adjusted the strap of her tote bag over her shoulder and exhaled slowly. Her back ached, 7 months pregnant. Every step felt like a quiet negotiation with gravity. She had a first-class ticket to Atlanta, seat 2A, a business trip that should have been uneventful. Naomi dressed simply cream cardigan, light jeans, white sneakers, no jewelry except for a plain gold wedding band. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who didn't need to prove herself, though experience had taught her that, as a black woman, that calm was often misunderstood. When she approached the gate, she smiled politely. "Good morning," she said softly, handing over her boarding pass. The flight attendant at the gate barely looked up. Lindsay Cooper, 29. Tired eyes framed by heavy makeup, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that seemed to strain against her mood. Her jaw clenched as she scanned Naomi's pass. There was a brief silence. Then Lindsay's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, this line is for first-class boarding only." Naomi blinked. "Yes, that's me." Lindsay frowned, lips curving into disbelief. "I don't think so. First class is for premium passengers. You might want to check your ticket again." The words hung in the air casual, cutting, soaked in quiet condescension. A few passengers turned their heads. Naomi felt the first sting in her chest. Her instinct told her to stay calm. She'd had these moments before in boardrooms, in restaurants, even in elevators. Moments when someone decided, based solely on skin color, that she did not belong. Still, her voice remained steady. "I'm aware. Seat 2A. Lindsay's brows furrowed. She took the boarding pass again, studying it as if searching for proof of a scam. "Brooks. Naomi Brooks." She read out loud, almost mockingly. "This looks odd. How did you get this ticket? I purchased it." Lindsay let out a short, derisive laugh. "Right." Naomi felt her pulse rise, but she didn't move. Behind her, the boarding line grew longer. A man in a gray suit sighed loudly, checking his watch. "Can we move this along?" he muttered. Lindsay ignored him, her voice cutting through the hum of the gate. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your ID." Naomi opened her bag slowly. Deliberately, her movements calm, controlled. She handed over her driver's license. The faint glint of a black credit card peeked from the wallet's edge. Lindsay glanced at it but said nothing. "Everything matches," Naomi said quietly. Lindsay hesitated. Something about Naomi's composure irritated her, that calm defiance that didn't fit the stereotype she expected. She turned away, calling toward another attendant. David, can you come here a sec? David Chen, the lead flight attendant, walked over a tall man in his late 30s with gentle eyes that spoke of exhaustion from too many years of service and too little change. What's wrong? He asked softly. This passenger insists she's in first class. Lindsay gestured toward Naomi like she was a problem to be solved. But this doesn't make sense. David looked at the boarding pass, then at Naomi. His expression softened instantly. Everything seems correct, he said, handing the ticket back. Lindsay's lips tightened. I'll call the gate supervisor. There must be some kind of error. Naomi felt her baby shift inside her, a light flutter that reminded her she wasn't alone. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered silently, "It's okay, sweetheart." We'll stay calm. As she waited, the whispers around her grew. A young woman nearby whispered to her partner, "This is so wrong." Another man muttered, "You'd think we were past this by now." But nobody intervened. Not yet. Lindsay turned her back and made a quick call on the airplane phone. "Yeah, I have a passenger here claiming she's first class. Naomi Brooks. Seat 2A. Can you confirm?" Her tone dripped with irritation. Naomi's throat tightened. Her therapist once told her that racism rarely came as shouting, it came as exhaustion. 1,000 small humiliations disguised as protocol. The voice on the other end of Lindsay's call must have confirmed the ticket, because her tone changed slightly. "What do you mean it's valid? Are you sure? Maybe it's some kind of points upgrade mistake?" A few seconds of silence. "Fine," she snapped, slamming the receiver down. "Apparently, it's valid." Then she turned back, her voice low, patronizing. "Ma'am, I'll let you through, but just so you know, we expect first-class passengers to maintain a certain standard of appearance. Our premium guests value the experience." Naomi met her eyes. "I value respect." A quiet gasp came from someone nearby. Lindsay's nostrils flared. "Excuse me." Naomi didn't respond. She just took her ticket and walked toward the jet bridge, each step slow and steady. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face stayed serene. The first-class cabin smelled faintly of citrus and leather. Warm light filtered through the windows. Naomi placed her bag carefully in the overhead compartment and sat down, exhaling. A teenage girl across the aisle whispered to her mother, "She's so calm." "I'd be freaking out," her mother replied softly. "That's how you survive." Naomi looked out the window, clouds like distant cotton over Puget Sound. She thought of her mother, Gloria, who used to say, "We endure not because we're weak, but because we're strong enough to choose peace." But peace was hard. It always was. Moments later, Lindsay entered the cabin again, scanning the seats. Her gaze locked on Naomi. "Ma'am," she said tightly, "I'll need to recheck your boarding information. There's still a discrepancy in the system." Naomi's voice was calm, but steel hid beneath it. "You already verified it twice. I just need to be sure." "You need to be sure I belong here," Naomi replied. That made Lindsay's cheeks redden. "Don't make this about race," she snapped. Naomi looked at her steadily. "I'm not. You did." A ripple went through the cabin. Phones came out subtle, but unmistakable. David Chen appeared again, tension in his shoulders. "Lindsay, let's just let her settle in." "Okay." But Lindsay's pride was hooked now. "I'm just doing my job," she said defensively. Naomi folded her hands over her belly. "No, you're abusing your power." Lindsay's eyes flashed. "Watch your tone." "I don't need to," Naomi said softly. "My dignity isn't up for negotiation." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hum of the engines seemed to pause. A woman in seat 3B whispered, "She's amazing." Naomi stayed still, eyes lowered, inhaling slowly to calm the trembling in her chest. Inside, her thoughts spiraled. Why does this still happen after everything I've built? After every barrier I've broken? It still comes down to this. My skin. She could feel the baby move again, soft but insistent. That tiny life inside her reminded her what was at stake, not just her comfort, but the world her daughter would be born into. She pressed her hand gently against her belly. "I'm okay," she murmured to herself. But in truth, she wasn't. Not really. Because beneath her composure was something deeper. A quiet ache that came from years of having to be calm for other people's comfort. Outside the aircraft window, rain began to fall in thin silver streaks. The boarding announcements echoed faintly from the jet bridge final call for Flight 227 to Atlanta. Lindsay straightened her uniform and gave Naomi one last disdainful glance before turning away. David Chen lingered for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath. Naomi met his eyes. "Then do better next time." He nodded, ashamed. As the cabin filled, Naomi leaned back in her seat, her mind replaying the morning like a film reel. The looks, the disbelief, the way her simple presence had become a provocation. Stay calm, she told herself again. She'd learned that dignity wasn't silence, it was restraint. It was choosing not to let someone else's hatred define her humanity. But deep down, she also knew there were lines you couldn't cross. And Lindsay Cooper had just walked dangerously close to one. The plane's cabin smelled faintly of jet fuel and new leather. Naomi leaned back, exhaling slowly as the last passengers settled in. A soft chime announced the final boarding, and the doors sealed shut with a muted thud. She thought, briefly, that the worst was over. She was wrong. Lindsay moved briskly down the aisle, her heels clicking against the floor, clipboard in hand. Her face was a carefully composed mask of professionalism, but Naomi could feel the heat of resentment radiating from her with every step. Lindsay stopped beside her seat, looked down, and forced a brittle smile. "Ma'am, can I offer you some water before we depart?" Her tone was polite enough to fool anyone who hadn't witnessed the earlier exchange, but Naomi heard the tension in it, the unspoken, "You don't belong here," still hiding beneath the surface. Naomi smiled faintly. "No, thank you." She opened her tablet, trying to focus on the presentation she'd been working on for weeks. But her mind kept drifting. Her heart beat a little too fast. Her baby shifted inside her belly, small but firm movements, as if echoing her unease. She rested a hand there, whispering inwardly, "We're fine. Just breathe." From across the aisle, the teenage girl from before, brown curls, curious eyes peeked over. She mouthed, "Are you okay?" Naomi nodded with a quiet smile, but the moment was broken when Lindsay's voice cut sharply across the cabin. "Passengers, please fasten your seatbelts as we prepare for takeoff." Then she leaned close to Naomi again, lowering her voice. "I'll need to double-check your ticket information once we're airborne. The manifest system is showing an irregularity." Naomi frowned. "You've checked it 3 times. "Yes," Lindsay said briskly. "But security protocol requires verification when something doesn't align." David Chen, passing by, hesitated mid-step. "Lindsay, she's cleared. Everything's fine." Lindsay didn't even look at him. "I said I'll verify. Go prep for service." David opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. His silence was heavy. Naomi's patience thinned. She looked straight at Lindsay and spoke quietly. "You're not following protocol. You're following bias." Lindsay's eyes flashed with indignation. "Excuse me. You've made me a target since I boarded. I've been polite, calm, and cooperative. What else do you need to believe I belong here?" I'm not going to argue, Lindsay snapped, though her voice trembled slightly. I'm doing my job. Naomi tilted her head. Are you? Her words were soft, but they struck hard. Lindsay inhaled sharply, as if slapped by the truth. For a second, neither spoke. The engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi, trembling slightly as it turned toward the runway. Outside, rain streaked across the window, each drop illuminated by the morning light. When they reached cruising altitude, Lindsay returned, clipboard still in hand. She stopped at Naomi's seat again, ignoring the curious stares from other passengers. Ma'am, please present your ID once more. Naomi closed her tablet deliberately and turned to face her. Ms. Cooper, this is harassment. It's protocol. No, it's not. It's humiliation. The words carried through the cabin. People turned to listen. David Chen froze halfway through the aisle, torn between his duty and conscience. He finally said, Lindsay, please let it go. But Lindsay was unraveling. Her pride was bleeding into anger, and anger into fear. She felt control slipping through her fingers, and that terrified her more than anything. Her voice rose. If you can't respect the authority of this crew, you can be escorted off the aircraft. Naomi blinked slowly. Escorted for sitting in my seat. Several phones lifted again. Red recording lights dotted the cabin like silent witnesses. Lindsay, David warned softly. Stop. But Lindsay didn't stop. You people always. She cut herself off. Too late. Gasps erupted around her. Naomi's face stayed still, but inside, something shattered and hardened at once. She rose carefully from her seat. Finish that sentence, she said, her voice quiet as glass breaking. Lindsay stepped back. Sit down. Now. Naomi didn't move. No, you owe me respect. The same you give every passenger here. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Someone in row 4 whispered, This is crazy. Another muttered, She's pregnant. For God's sake. Lindsay's face reddened. Sit down before I call security. Call them. Naomi said evenly. I'll wait. And she did. She stood there, 7 months pregnant, calm but unyielding. The plane was silent except for the hum of the engines. Finally, 2 airport security officers entered through the front, summoned by Lindsay's call. Their confusion was immediate. They saw a pregnant woman standing quietly while a flustered flight attendant pointed accusingly at her. This passenger is refusing to follow crew instructions, Lindsay said quickly. Naomi turned toward them, her voice clear but soft. Gentlemen, I have done nothing except sit in my assigned first-class seat. This flight attendant has repeatedly questioned my right to be here. The taller officer looked between them, frowning. Do you have your ticket? Ma'am Naomi handed it over, along with her ID. He scanned them. Everything matches. She's fine. See? David murmured. Lindsay crossed her arms. I still think it's a system glitch. It's not, the officer replied flatly. You're good, ma'am. Naomi nodded. Thank you. Then she turned back to Lindsay. Can I sit now? Lindsay's voice shook. Do what you want. Naomi sat down slowly, heart pounding, but her face unreadable. The teenage girl across the aisle whispered to her phone camera, This is going viral. She's handling it like a queen. Naomi leaned back, trying to breathe. Her baby kicked again, stronger this time. Her mind flickered between exhaustion and sorrow. Why did she have to keep proving her worth? Why did calm always have to be her armor? She remembered her father's voice when she was a child. When they come for your dignity, don't hand it to them. Make them take it and watch what happens when they try. Her lips curved slightly at the memory, but before she could collect her thoughts, Lindsay appeared again, unable to let go. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me." Lindsay's tone hardened. "We need to reseat you. It'll make things easier for everyone." "Easier for you," Naomi corrected. "Not for me. This is my cabin," Lindsay snapped. "And you're making other guests uncomfortable." A businessman in seat 2B looked up. "Actually, ma'am," he said dryly, "the only uncomfortable person here is you." Laughter rippled softly through the cabin. Lindsay's face went pale. She turned on him. "Sir, please mind your own business." He shrugged. "We all are. You're the one creating the scene." Naomi didn't speak. She didn't have to. The crowd was beginning to see her truth. But Lindsay's frustration boiled over. "I don't care what the system says. I know who belongs here." Naomi looked up, calm but deadly serious. "And I know who doesn't." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The engines droned in the background like a low warning. The cabin air felt heavy, electric. Lindsay leaned closer, voice trembling. "You think you can talk to me like that?" Naomi met her gaze. "I think you've forgotten who you're talking to." That was the moment something inside Lindsay snapped. The long hours, the resentment, the years of silent bitterness at the world, all of it found a target. Her hand twitched, rising halfway before she caught herself. She lowered it, shaking. Naomi didn't flinch. "Don't." Lindsay's breathing came fast. "You people think you can intimidate me because," Naomi's voice sliced through her words like a blade, "because what?" Lindsay froze. The entire cabin waited for the answer she didn't dare finish. David stepped forward quickly, placing himself between them. "Enough. Everyone, please remain calm. Ms. Cooper, take a break." But the damage was done. The cameras had caught every word. The comments on the live stream were exploding. "This is insane. She's pregnant. Someone fire that attendant." Naomi sank slowly back into her seat, heart racing, one hand on her belly. David whispered, "I'm sorry. I'll fix this." She didn't answer. Her silence was her strength. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a faint golden hue inside the cabin. It was almost peaceful again, almost. Naomi gazed out at the horizon, her reflection in the glass calm but weary. Inside, she was fighting tears. "Stay centered," she told herself. "You're not just you right now. You're every woman who's ever had to smile through injustice." And for a fleeting second, she thought maybe it was over, that the humiliation, the scrutiny, the hostility would stop. But deep down, a voice whispered it hasn't even begun. Across the aisle, the teenage girl's phone screen showed over 8,000 viewers watching live. Comments flew by faster than anyone could read. "This woman is Grace under fire. The airline's in trouble. She's pregnant. This is heartbreaking." Naomi didn't know any of that yet. She just sat quietly, unaware that the world was already watching her fight for dignity unfold in real time. Her hand rested on her belly as her baby kicked once more, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of resilience itself. Then Lindsay's voice came again, brittle and cold. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to put your phone away." Before she stopped, realizing Naomi wasn't holding one. It was the teenagers. Dozens of passengers were filming now. The power dynamic had shifted slightly, though Lindsay hadn't realized it yet. She was still clinging to control, like a drowning person reaching for air. Naomi turned her gaze to her, unblinking. "You've humiliated me enough. Please stop." Her voice trembled at the edges, but the strength within it was unbreakable. "You've already crossed too many lines." For the first time, Lindsay looked uncertain. "But pride is a cruel master." She squared her shoulders and muttered, "We'll see." Naomi looked away. The plane steadied as it leveled off at 36,000 feet. Clouds rolled beneath them like an ocean. From above, the world looked calm, small, distant, silent. But inside that cabin, something vast and irreversible had already begun. The passengers knew it. David knew it. And deep down, Naomi knew it too. There are moments in life when dignity demands a price. She didn't yet realize that hers would shake an entire airline before the day was done. The cabin had grown tense, wrapped in a quiet unease that no amount of polite smiles could disguise. The air felt charged, heavy with everything left unsaid. Naomi Brooks sat in seat 2A, eyes fixed on the small oval window beside her. Clouds drifted by like slow-moving ghosts. From the outside, the flight was smooth, routine. Inside, a storm brewed with every beat of her heart. Lindsay Cooper stood a few rows back, arms crossed, jaw tight. She had replayed the morning in her head over and over again, every interaction twisting itself into justification. She told herself she wasn't racist, just thorough. She told herself the woman's attitude had provoked her. She told herself she was maintaining order. Lies have a way of sounding like truth when spoken in fear. David Chen, the lead flight attendant, busied himself at the galley, wiping already clean counters. His stomach churned. He wanted to intervene, to protect Naomi, to stop whatever was coming next. But his career hung by a thread, and silence was safer. Still, his conscience clawed at him like a trapped animal. Naomi sipped water slowly, the glass trembling slightly in her hand. She felt the baby move again, a reminder of fragility, of what she was carrying. The hum of the engines filled her ears, blending with her heartbeat. She could almost hear her mother's voice again. When you face cruelty, child, stay calm long enough for the world to see who's truly wrong. Her phone buzzed on the tray table. A message from Elijah appeared. Elijah landed from Chicago. Meeting delayed. Call when you land. Okay. Love you. She smiled faintly and typed, "Boarded. We'll call soon." Then she turned the screen off. Lindsay approached again, each step deliberate, her expression unreadable. Passengers glanced up, sensing trouble. The teenage girl from earlier whispered, "Oh no, she's coming again," into her phone. The live stream still quietly running. The viewer count had already crossed 10,000. Lindsay stopped beside Naomi, speaking through clenched teeth. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate. This behavior is becoming disruptive." Naomi looked up, eyes calm but cold. "What behavior sitting quietly? You're recording," Lindsay snapped. "I'm not. Others are. Then tell them to stop." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Why they're documenting what's happening. Maybe that's the only reason you're not yelling again." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Lindsay's composure cracked for a split second. Her cheeks flushed red. "You have no right to know," Naomi interrupted softly. "You have no right to treat anyone this way." Lindsay's voice rose. "You think you can talk down to me because you have a fancy ticket, because you want to play the victim? I've worked here for 8 years. I know who belongs in first class, and who doesn't." Naomi's tone stayed calm, even, "Say it. Go ahead." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the engines seemed to fade beneath the weight of the moment. Lindsay's breathing quickened. She stepped closer, invading Naomi's space. "Watch your tone," Lindsay hissed. "You people." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The slur wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air anyway, invisible yet sharp enough to cut. Naomi's lips parted slightly, her breath shallow. Inside, a war was raging. Anger clawed at her chest, begging to break free, to shout, to scream. But another voice whispered, steady and maternal. Stay centered. You are not here to fight her hate. You are here to reveal it. She inhaled deeply and said softly, "If you touch me, that's assault." Lindsay laughed a small, brittle sound. "Don't threaten me. I'm not. I'm warning you." The plane jolted slightly as it hit turbulence, and the sudden motion seemed to tip Lindsay's last ounce of restraint over the edge. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she spat. "You're nothing but—" The sound came before the thought could form. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin. The slap. The impact rang like thunder in the confined space, cutting through the air with brutal clarity. Naomi's head snapped to the side. Her glass fell, shattering on the floor. For a heartbeat, everything froze. No one breathed. No one moved. David dropped the tray he was carrying. A businessman in 2B rose halfway from his seat, eyes wide. The teenage girl gasped so loudly her livestream mic caught it clear as day. Naomi didn't move. Her cheek burned, her skin stung, but her soul was still. The cabin erupted. Voices collided in chaos. "Oh my God, she hit her. She's pregnant." Get security phones rose everywhere, recording from every angle. Lindsay stood frozen, her hand still suspended mid-air, the horror of what she'd done creeping into her features. Naomi touched her face gently. Her fingers came away trembling. She could feel the shape of Lindsay's hand imprinted on her cheek, the sting pulsing like heat. She looked up at her attacker, eyes glistening not with tears, but with something far more dangerous composure. "Did you just hit me?" she asked quietly. Lindsay's mouth opened, but no sound came. "You did," Naomi continued softly. "You hit a pregnant passenger." On camera. David rushed forward. "Naomi misses. Brooks, please. Sit down. I'll handle this." She didn't move. "No. I want her to understand what she's done. Please." David whispered, voice shaking. "I'll call the captain." The businessman in 2B raised his voice. "Captain, someone just assaulted a passenger." The intercom crackled. "What's happening back there?" "Your flight attendant hit a woman." Another voice shouted. Naomi straightened slowly, her belly rising with the motion. She felt her baby shift again, restless, alive. "Stay calm, little one," she whispered under her breath. "Justice is coming." Lindsay backed away, panic overtaking defiance. "It was an accident. I didn't mean." Naomi cut her off. "You meant every word before it happened." The slap just showed the truth behind them. The cabin door burst open as Captain Harris appeared, his gray hair disheveled, face pale. "What's going on here?" "She assaulted me," Naomi said simply, pointing at Lindsay. The captain looked from one woman to the other, then at the passengers with their phones raised like a jury of thousands. "Ms. Cooper, is that true?" It wasn't," she provoked. "You hit her." Lindsay's voice broke. "Yes, but get off my plane," the captain said, voice low but trembling with anger. David stepped between them quickly. "Captain, maybe we should—" "No, maybe," Harris snapped. "You don't lay hands on passengers. Ever." But Naomi wasn't finished. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it filled the cabin. "This isn't just a passenger. This is a mother, a human being, and you struck me because you couldn't accept that I belong here." The passengers murmured in agreement. Cameras flashed. Lindsay began to cry. "Please." I didn't know. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "Didn't know what?" "That I'm black, that I'm pregnant, that I paid for this seat with the same money as everyone else." Lindsay sobbed harder. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did," Naomi said softly, "because hate doesn't need intent. It just needs permission, and you gave it to yourself." The captain took a deep breath. "We're turning around. We'll land back in Seattle." "No," Naomi said quickly. We're not stopping the plane for her mistake. He hesitated. Ma'am, we need to file a report. Then file it when we land in Atlanta. I'm not giving her the power to disrupt hundreds of people. That calm authority silenced everyone. Even Lindsay stopped crying. Naomi turned her gaze out the window again, her reflection faint in the glass. She could see the red mark spreading across her cheek, and she realized something profound. This wasn't humiliation. It was revelation. The world would see this for what it was. David knelt beside her, whispering, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped her. Naomi's voice softened, then stopped the next one. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. Around them, the cabin buzzed with whispered outrage, empathy, disbelief. Passengers texted families, posted videos, tweeted hashtags that were already beginning to trend. Flight 27, Justice for Naomi, Chalk Dignity, in the sky. Lindsay sat slumped in the jump seat, trembling, her mind spinning. She saw her life collapsing in slow motion. The anger, the resentment, all of it had curdled into regret, too late to matter. Naomi closed her eyes. The sound of her baby's heartbeat echoed faintly in her memory from the last doctor's visit, steady and pure. She held on to that rhythm now. When she finally opened her eyes again, she spoke softly but firmly. Captain, please note the time. 11:42 a.m. The assault occurred then. I'll need the report when we land. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Naomi turned to the teenage girl across the aisle. Are you still live? The girl nodded nervously. Good, Naomi said. Keep it running. The truth deserves light. A murmur of agreement swept through the rows. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the world below in bands of gold. Naomi looked at it and felt something deep within her settle. She had been struck, yes, but she hadn't been defeated. Dignity, she realized, wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about standing tall after it. The plane soared on toward Atlanta, its passengers unknowingly carrying the spark of a national reckoning. Somewhere in her heart, Naomi sensed that this wasn't just her story anymore. It was everyone's who had ever been told to sit down and stay silent, and she was done sitting. The hum of the engines softened as Flight 227 began its slow descent into calm air. The earlier chaos had settled into a heavy, stunned quiet. Every passenger sat differently now, tenser, more aware, their gazes shifting between Naomi Brooks and the disgraced flight attendant huddled near the galley. The slap had broken something larger than protocol. It had fractured the illusion that prejudice belonged to the past. Naomi leaned her head back, eyes closed. The warmth on her cheek had dulled to a deep ache. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation now left her trembling in exhaustion. She felt her baby move gently again, small reassurance that she was still whole. David Chen hovered nearby, voice low, respectful. Mrs. Brooks, can I get you anything ice water? She opened her eyes slowly. Just a blanket, please. He nodded and returned moments later with one, his hands shaking slightly as he handed it over. I called the captain. He's reporting everything. Security will meet us in Atlanta. Naomi adjusted the blanket over her lap. Thank you, David. He hesitated before walking away. I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry. Naomi's tone was gentle but firm. You still can. Her words lingered with him like a quiet command. At the front of the plane, Lindsay Cooper sat in the jump seat, face pale, eyes red. Her perfect bun had loosened, and strands of hair framed her face in disarray. She'd spent the last hour cycling between tears, panic, and disbelief. She thought of the paycheck she needed, the rent due next week, the career she had built. But beneath all that fear, shame had begun to grow a slow, creeping awareness that no excuse could erase what the cameras had captured. Passengers whispered, their phones buzzing nonstop. Videos were already spreading across social media, headlines forming in real time. Flight attendant assaults, pregnant black CEO, airline racism caught live. The world outside was waking up to what had happened inside this narrow tube of sky. Naomi didn't know the scale yet, but she sensed it. The way people looked at her, some with awe, others with sorrow, told her the story was no longer hers alone. She was carrying something larger now, the weight of countless others who had endured the same quiet indignity. The intercom crackled, and Captain Harris's voice broke the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be making a brief announcement shortly. Please remain seated." David looked uneasy as he passed Naomi's row again. "He's on the phone with corporate," he whispered. "They're taking this seriously." Naomi simply nodded, as they should. Her phone buzzed again. She reached for it, glancing at the screen. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Aerosky's PR team. We've been notified of an incident. Are you safe?" She blinked. They knew her name. She hadn't given it to anyone on the plane except at check-in. Another text followed immediately. "Your father has been informed. Please expect a call." Her breath caught. Her father, Richard Brooks, the man who had built half the airline industry from the ground up, the man who had raised her to fight quietly but fiercely for her place in the world, the man whose influence stretched across boardrooms from New York to London. She hadn't wanted him to know, not like this. The phone rang before she could react. She hesitated, then answered. "Dad." His voice was calm but cold, the kind of calm that comes from deep, controlled fury. "Naomi, are you hurt?" Her throat tightened. "I'm fine. I just saw the footage." She closed her eyes. "Of course you did." There was a pause. "Stay on the plane. Do not argue. I've already spoken to the board and to Elijah." Her husband's name hit her like sunlight through a storm. "Elijah's flying. He's landing in Atlanta within the hour. He's on his way to you." Naomi opened her eyes, heart thudding softly. "Dad, don't make this worse. I don't want revenge." "This isn't revenge," he said evenly. "It's accountability. You built your company on that word. Now it's their turn to learn what it means." She hesitated. "Please be careful." "I don't want them to think," he interrupted gently, his tone softening. "Let them think whatever they want. The truth doesn't need their permission." Naomi felt her throat burn with emotion. "I love you, Dad." "I know, sweetheart. Now sit tight." She ended the call and let the phone rest on her belly. The baby moved again, as if responding to her heartbeat. She whispered, "It's okay, Grace. We're safe." Lindsay looked over, confused. "Who was that?" Naomi turned her head slightly. "My father." Lindsay scoffed weakly, voice trembling. "So what? You gonna have your daddy sue me?" Naomi met her eyes. "No. He doesn't need to sue you. He owns part of the airline." The words landed like thunder. Every nearby passenger turned. David froze mid-step. Even Captain Harris, standing at the front, looked back sharply. Lindsay's mouth opened in disbelief. What Naomi's tone stayed calm, almost too calm. "My father is Richard Brooks. He holds 30% of Aerosky's shares." Lindsay's face drained of color. "You're lying." Naomi looked back at her phone screen, where her father's name glowed under a recent call. "I'm not." A heavy silence filled the air. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Another murmured, "That's her." The Brooks Innovations founder, Naomi, didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth had shifted the air again this time, in her favor. Captain Harris stepped forward slowly, voice hushed but respectful. "Mrs. Brooks, I didn't realize you didn't have to." She interrupted softly. "Respect shouldn't require a resume." The captain looked away, ashamed. Lindsay was shaking now, her breathing shallow. I didn't know who you were." Naomi's gaze was unwavering. "And if I weren't anyone important, would that make what you did acceptable?" Lindsay's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I wasn't thinking you were," Naomi said quietly. "You just weren't thinking of me as a person." The power dynamic had inverted completely. Naomi wasn't yelling, wasn't vengeful. Her voice was too calm, too measured, it frightened Lindsay more than shouting ever could. David stepped in gently, looking between them. "Mrs. Brooks, we'll make sure everything is handled properly when we land." Naomi nodded. "I trust you, David." He swallowed hard. "Thank you." The captain cleared his throat. "Corporate has instructed me to remove Ms. Cooper from duty upon landing. Security will escort her off the aircraft." Lindsay covered her face, tears spilling freely. "Please don't. I'll lose everything." Naomi looked at her, her expression unreadable. Maybe losing everything is how you learn what matters. The rest of the flight passed in heavy silence. The passengers, once restless, now treated Naomi with reverent respect. Strangers whispered words of support as they walked past her row. Some placed gentle hands on her shoulder in solidarity. As the wheels touched down in Atlanta, a quiet murmur rippled through the cabin. Outside the window, Naomi could see the flashing lights of airport security vehicles waiting beside the terminal. She took a deep breath. It was over, or at least, this part was. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Captain Harris made a final announcement, his voice subdued. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived safely in Atlanta. Please remain seated until further instructions." Lindsay rose unsteadily, her body trembling. Two uniformed officers entered the cabin, stopping beside her. She looked to Naomi with pleading eyes. "Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding." Naomi looked back, calm as glass. "I already told the truth. The rest isn't mine to change." The officers guided Lindsay toward the exit, her sobs echoing softly down the aisle. David approached Naomi once more, voice thick. "Mrs. Brooks, your husband's waiting outside the gate. Corporate's all ready." She raised a hand gently. "I'll face it when I'm ready." As she stood, her back straightened, shoulders lifted, the passengers began to clap quietly, hesitant at first, then stronger, a spontaneous gesture of support, of gratitude, of recognition. Naomi didn't smile. She simply nodded, her eyes glistening. She stepped off the plane, the cool terminal air washing over her like release. Flashbulbs flickered in the distance. Someone had leaked the story already. She didn't care. She had survived the humiliation, the violence, and had done it with grace intact. In that moment, she understood something her mother once said. When they try to break your spirit, don't fight back with rage. Fight back by staying whole. And she had. As she walked down the jet bridge, her phone buzzed again. A message from Elijah appeared. "I'm here." Her steps quickened. She didn't know what awaited her at that gate, the media, the corporate chaos, the reckoning. But she knew one thing: she wouldn't face it alone. The terminal lights were too bright after the dim hush of the cabin. Naomi stepped through the jet bridge, clutching her small carry-on as her other hand rested instinctively on her belly. The cool air carried a faint scent of coffee and jet fuel, familiar and oddly grounding. For a moment she just stood there, eyes half closed, taking a slow breath to steady herself before facing the crowd waiting beyond the gate. When she opened her eyes, She saw him. Elijah Brooks stood near the window, tall, composed, his presence commanding even in stillness. A tailored gray suit hugged his broad shoulders. But what drew everyone's gaze was the calm intensity in his eyes, the kind that said he was used to fixing chaos, the kind that made rooms go silent. Naomi froze for half a heartbeat. The exhaustion of the flight melted when their eyes met. He crossed the floor in long strides, his phone still in his hand, earpiece hanging from one ear. Without a word, he reached her, gently touching her cheek where the faint red mark still lingered. "Naomi," he whispered, voice low but firm. "Are you hurt?" Her eyes glistened. "Just my pride," she said softly. Elijah's jaw tightened. Then they hurt the wrong woman. She caught his wrist, grounding him before the storm she could already see building. "Elijah, don't." He shook his head slowly. "No. It's already done." Behind them, cameras flashed. Airport security stood uncertain at a distance, unsure whether to approach. Elijah gave them a glance, just one, and they backed off, instinctively recognizing authority. Within seconds, several men and women in dark suits appeared from the other side of the concourse, moving with the quiet efficiency of people who answered directly to power. David Chen, the flight attendant, stepped forward nervously, his voice trembling. "Mr. Brooks, sir, I was there. I saw everything. She didn't do anything wrong." Elijah turned to him, his expression softening a fraction. "I know you did the right thing at the end. Thank you for protecting her." David nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Then Elijah looked toward the gate where Lindsay Cooper stood between two airport police officers, pale as paper, hands clasped tightly in front of her. The crowd around them parted instinctively. Whispers rippled like wind through dry grass. Elijah approached slowly, his steps deliberate, quiet, terrifyingly calm. The hush that fell was absolute. Even the officers seemed uneasy, sensing the weight of what was unfolding. Lindsay couldn't look him in the eye. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "Mr. Brooks, please, I didn't know who she was. I didn't mean." He stopped just short of her, close enough for her to see the fury restrained behind his composure. "You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with basic decency?" She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I made a mistake." "No," he said quietly. "You made a choice, and now you live with the consequences of that choice." Her knees wobbled. One of the officers reached out to steady her. Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word carried a gravity that made the space around him smaller, heavier, behind him. Naomi watched silently, her hand resting on her belly. Her heart ached not for the woman who'd humiliated her, but for what this moment represented, a reckoning long overdue, but still painful to witness. Elijah turned to the captain, who had followed them out, his face drawn and pale. "Captain Harris." Elijah said, "Yes, sir. Your report is being reviewed by Aerosky's legal division as we speak. The board will have questions. Answer them honestly. I understand. You will also ensure every passenger who recorded the incident is protected. No retaliation, no NDAs. Yes, sir." "Good." Naomi moved closer, touching Elijah's arm gently. "Elijah, please," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "Let's not turn this into a public execution." He turned toward her, his gaze softening. "This isn't vengeance, Naomi. It's justice, visible justice." She looked into his eyes for a long moment. "Then promise me we'll stop when it's enough." He hesitated, then nodded once. Corporate representatives had started to arrive, dark suits, tense faces, earpieces buzzing with rapid instructions. The regional director of Aero Sky, a woman named Karen DeLuca, approached cautiously. "Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, please come with us to the executive lounge. We're deeply sorry for what's happened. Our leadership team is already—" Elijah raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Don't apologize here. Not with cameras watching. Not until you've fixed the system that allowed this to happen." Karen's throat bobbed. "Yes, sir." He leaned closer. "And don't call my wife Mrs. Brooks like she's a prop in your PR recovery plan. She's Dr. Brooks. She earned that title long before any of you learned how to spell equity." The woman's cheeks flushed. "Of course, Dr. Brooks." Naomi placed her hand over his again, squeezing lightly. "Let's sit down," she said quietly. "I need to breathe." They were escorted into a private lounge overlooking the runway. The room was glass and steel, sleek and silent except for the distant hum of planes. Naomi sank onto a couch, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Elijah remained standing, pacing slowly. "Richard's on a conference call," he said, checking his phone. "The board meeting's already started. Aero Sky is in full crisis mode." Naomi let out a tired laugh. That didn't take long. He sat beside her, his expression softening. "You know, when I got the call, I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe that kind of ignorance couldn't happen anymore. Not like this." She looked at him, eyes shining. "It happens every day. Elijah, to people who don't have fathers like mine, or husbands like you." He rubbed his temples, the weight of her words settling deep in his chest. "That's the part that kills me. If it takes a billionaire's daughter to get justice, what happens to everyone else?" Naomi sighed, leaning back. "Then maybe we use this to make something better, not just for us." A knock interrupted them. Karen re-entered, visibly nervous. "Mr. and Dr. Brooks, the CEO of Aero Sky, is joining via conference in 5 minutes. They're preparing an official statement." Elijah's tone was measured but firm. "Make sure that statement includes accountability, not just empty apologies." "Yes, sir." When she left, Naomi turned to him. "Promise me something. Anything. If this becomes a fight about power, we lose the point. This has to be about dignity." He met her gaze and nodded. "Then we'll make it about that." The conference began with the CEO's face flickering on a large monitor, an older man, tense but polished. "Mr. Brooks, Dr. Brooks, on behalf of Aero Sky, I extend our sincerest apologies. The employee involved has been terminated, effective immediately. We are cooperating fully with authorities." Elijah folded his hands. "Good, but you'll need to do more than that. This can't just disappear into a press cycle." The CEO shifted uneasily. "We're launching a review of our training procedures." Naomi interrupted softly. "No, launch a reform, not a review." Her voice was quiet, but the room stilled. "You can't train empathy out of people who've never had to answer for their biases. You build accountability into the structure. You make sure every passenger, no matter the color of their skin, knows they'll be treated with dignity." The CEO nodded slowly, her composure steady, yet her voice low. "Understood. Dr. Brooks, we'll name it after your initiative, the Brooks Standard." Naomi exchanged a glance with Elijah. "Make it the Grace Standard," she corrected. "After our daughter, for every traveler who deserves to arrive safely and respected." The CEO blinked, then smiled faintly. "Of course." When the call ended, the room fell silent again. Naomi exhaled deeply, the tension finally easing from her shoulders. Elijah watched her quietly, admiration in his gaze. "You did that," he said softly. "You turned humiliation into change." She smiled faintly. "No. We did. And maybe Lindsay, she'll learn, too. Outside the glass wall, reporters were gathering near the terminal windows, their cameras flashing. News vans lined the curb. The story had already taken flight, an image of Naomi's calm face, the faint mark on her cheek, and Elijah's protective stance beside her. The headlines wrote themselves. Hours later, after statements were released and security escorted them to a private exit, Naomi and Elijah finally stepped into the warm Georgia evening. The city lights shimmered beyond the runway, and for the first time that day, the world felt still. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't want this to be just another scandal," she murmured. He wrapped an arm around her. "Then let's make sure it isn't." As they walked toward the waiting car, her phone buzzed again, another message from her father. "Good job, kiddo. You turned fury into grace." She smiled, whispering, "That's all I ever wanted." Elijah opened the car door for her. "Let's go home." But as they drove away from the airport, past the flashing lights and lingering crowd, Naomi looked out the window and whispered to herself, "Home has to mean more than comfort now. It has to mean change." She didn't yet know that within weeks, her story would reshape an entire industry, that what started as an assault in the sky would become a national conversation about dignity, race, and reform. But that night, as she rested her hand over the gentle curve of her stomach, she already carried the next generation of hope. And she vowed silently, fiercely, that her daughter would grow up in a world where no one would ever have to prove they belonged. The next morning, the world had already changed. Naomi woke to the pale light seeping through the curtains of their Atlanta home, her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. She blinked the sleep from her eyes, but the notifications kept flashing hundreds of messages. Mentions, news alerts, every network, every headline carried the same story: flight attendant slaps pregnant black CEO husband and corporate titan demand accountability. She sat up slowly, pressing her palm against the small rise of her belly. Grace moved softly beneath her hand, a reminder that life was still growing, still calm inside the storm outside. The irony wasn't lost on her. The world had erupted in outrage, while the quiet rhythm of her unborn child's heartbeat reminded her to stay grounded. Elijah entered the room, phone in hand, expression tight. "It's everywhere," he said. CNN, The Washington Post, BBC, they're calling it the Skyline incident. Naomi sighed, rubbing her temples. Of course they are. He sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. People are divided. Most are furious on your behalf, but some, they're twisting it, calling it privilege, saying it only mattered because of who you are. Naomi's eyes darkened. They're not wrong. If I weren't a Brooks, this would have disappeared by now. That's the real story. Elijah. He looked at her, admiration and concern mixing behind his gaze. And you're still thinking about everyone else when you're the one who got hit. She smiled faintly. It's not about the slap anymore. It's about the silence that follows if I don't speak up. Downstairs, the living room had become a command center. Screens streamed live coverage, their names scrolling across the bottom banners. Richard Brooks, her father, appeared on one of them standing outside a boardroom, flanked by reporters. His silver hair gleamed under the camera lights. To anyone watching, he was saying, racism has no altitude limit. It can happen 30,000 feet in the air or right here on the ground. What matters is how we respond. Naomi paused the clip, her chest tightening with pride and sorrow. He always knows how to make a statement. Elijah poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her. He's calling for a complete audit of Aerosky's hiring and training. They've already suspended the regional director. Naomi took a sip. the warmth soothing her raw throat. Good, but that can't be the end. A knock sounded at the door. Their assistant, Lydia, peeked in. Naomi, you've got requests from every network. Good Morning America, Oprah Daily, 60 Minutes. They all want interviews. Naomi shook her head. Not yet. If I speak now, it'll be about anger. I want it to be about purpose. Lydia nodded quietly. There's one more thing. The Department of Justice called. They've opened an investigation. The words hung heavy in the air. Elijah exhaled slowly. That was fast. They have to, Naomi said softly. It's not just workplace misconduct, it's a hate crime under federal law. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of those words filling the space. Outside, the sound of reporters gathering on the street drifted through the windows. Later that afternoon, Naomi agreed to one short interview, a live segment streamed from her home. Controlled, calm, her voice steady but resonant. The interviewer's tone was gentle. Dr. Brooks, after everything that happened, what do you want people to take from this moment? Naomi paused before answering, looking straight into the camera. That dignity shouldn't depend on a last name, or a balance sheet, or how quietly you endure injustice. Every person, no matter where they sit on that plane, deserves to be treated like they belong there. If my story does anything, I hope it makes someone speak up sooner than I did. Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. The clip spread faster than the slap ever had. Within hours, millions had watched. Hashtags bloomed across social media. Grace in the sky, the Brooks Standard, fly with dignity. Airlines faced growing pressure. Aerosky's competitors released statements within the next 24 hours, all promising to review diversity training, but none sounded sincere. By evening, Naomi's inbox overflowed with messages. Strangers shared their own stories, flight attendants of color who'd endured bias from passengers, passengers who'd faced humiliation for their skin, mothers who'd been told they didn't belong in first class. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Carla, a single mom from Detroit. I saw your video. I was kicked off a flight last year for arguing about my seat. They said I was aggressive. I didn't have a camera or a husband in power. But watching you, I feel like I finally got my voice back. Naomi's throat tightened as she read it. This, she whispered, showing the message to Elijah. This is what I want to fight for. Elijah nodded. Then let's make it official. Let's turn this into a movement. The next week blurred into action. Meetings with lawyers, civil rights advocates, airline executives, and federal regulators. The Grace Standard became more than a name. It evolved into a full-scale reform plan. It required airlines to implement body cams for onboard staff, mandatory anti-bias training, and independent passenger advocacy hotlines. Naomi insisted that the training open with the footage of her own assault. If they have to look at it, she said, they'll remember why empathy matters. Meanwhile, Lindsay Cooper's trial became a public lesson in accountability. She pled guilty to assault and violation of civil rights. The judge's words echoed nationwide bigotry. When armed with authority, becomes violence, and violence, when ignored, becomes culture. Naomi didn't attend the sentencing. She didn't need to. Forgiveness, she'd realized, didn't require presence. It required peace. Months passed. The Grace Foundation launched officially with a $10 million endowment, co-funded by Brooks Innovations and Aero Sky. The first grant went to help underrepresented youth become pilots and aviation professionals. Naomi stood at the press conference podium, her now visible pregnancy radiating quiet strength. Cameras flashed, but her words cut through the noise. Change doesn't happen because people are shamed into it, she said. It happens when they finally understand that dignity is not negotiable. The applause was thunderous. That night, after the event, Naomi sat alone on the porch, the summer air thick and sweet. Crickets hummed softly. Elijah joined her with 2 mugs of tea. "You did it," he said, handing her a cup. She smiled. "We're just getting started." He looked out toward the stars. Funny thing, the higher people climb airplanes, careers, whatever, the more they forget how it feels to look someone in the eyes on the ground. She nodded slowly. "That's why we remind them." A pause. Then she whispered, "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that slap never came." Elijah turned to her. "Then the world might have stayed comfortable. And comfort is the enemy of change." She leaned against him, closing her eyes. "You always know what to say." "It's easy," he said softly. "You give me the words." 3 weeks later, Naomi received an invitation to speak before Congress at a special session on racial discrimination in public services. She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to relive it all again, but Elijah squeezed her hand. "You don't have to relive it," he said. "You just have to redefine it." Her testimony was broadcast nationwide. The hearing room was packed. She spoke not as a victim, but as a witness to something larger. "When that woman hit me," she said, voice clear and steady, "I realized that power isn't just who owns the airline. It's who decides whose pain matters. For years, people like me have been told to stay quiet, stay calm, stay respectable. But respectability doesn't save you from racism. Only accountability does." The room was silent except for the sound of her calm breathing. "I'm not here to destroy careers," she continued. "I'm here to build systems that make fairness automatic, so no one has to record their pain to prove it's real." The clip went viral again, this time across political platforms. For a brief moment, America listened not to anger, but to reason wrapped in compassion. By winter, airlines nationwide had adopted the grace standard. Passengers noticed small changes, better staff training, clearer policies, fewer incidents. Civil rights groups reported a measurable drop in discrimination complaints. Naomi received thousands of letters of gratitude, but one in particular stood out. It was from Lindsay Cooper, Dr. Brooks. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say thank you. Watching you speak in court, I realized what real strength looks like. I'm using my time to mentor others about bias. I hope someday my daughter grows up in the world you're building." Naomi folded the letter gently, her eyes misting. For the first time since that day, she felt something settle inside her, a soft, forgiving quiet. When Grace was born 6 months later, Naomi held her close in the hospital room's soft light. Elijah leaned beside her, whispering, "She has your eyes." Naomi smiled faintly. "Then she'll see the world differently." He kissed her forehead. "And maybe she'll never have to fight for her seat on a plane." Naomi gazed down at their daughter, the tiny hand curling around her finger. "That's the dream," she whispered. "A world where dignity doesn't need defending." Outside the window, dawn painted the sky in gold and pale blue. Airplanes rose in the distance, gliding smoothly into the morning. Naomi watched them, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small under their wings. She had become something larger, not a victim, not a headline, but a reminder that justice, when guided by grace, can rewrite the sky itself. 3 years had passed since the slap that changed everything. The world had moved on, as it always does. But for Naomi Brooks, moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying the lesson quietly, like a scar that no longer hurt but still remembered the blade. Atlanta had grown busier, brighter. On the top floor of the Brooks Innovations building, Naomi stood before a glass wall overlooking the skyline. The city stretched below her in golden light planes gliding across the horizon like silent messengers of progress. She smiled faintly. Every time she saw one now, she thought of Grace, both her daughter and her legacy. Mommy. The small voice behind her broke her reverie. Grace. Now, a curious toddler with big brown eyes and a head full of curls ran toward her holding a crayon-streaked paper. Look, I drew an airplane. Naomi turned, crouching down to meet her daughter's eyes. The drawing was uneven but vibrant, a pink plane soaring over blue clouds, a little stick figure waving from the window. That's beautiful, Naomi said softly. Is that you up there? Grace shook her head. That's you. You're flying. Naomi laughed, hugging her tightly. I guess I am. Elijah appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, a warm grin on his face. Our daughter's a visionary, maybe a future pilot. Grace giggled. No, Daddy. I want to build airplanes. He knelt beside them, his gaze full of quiet pride. Then you'll build them better than anyone ever has. The room filled with gentle laughter, a sound Naomi had come to treasure more than applause, more than speeches, more than any victory. Later that morning, as Elijah took Grace to preschool, Naomi prepared for a meeting with the Department of Transportation. The Grace Standard had been adopted internationally now. Over 60 airlines had signed onto the policy. Every month, Naomi met with regulators, advocates, and corporate leaders to ensure compliance stayed more than symbolic. When she arrived at the meeting, the walls were lined with posters showing passengers and crew smiling under the slogan, "Dignity flies everywhere." Naomi sat quietly at the head of the table as the director briefed the group. Dr. Brooks, he said, since the adoption of your framework, reported discrimination incidents have dropped by 32%. Passenger satisfaction's at an all-time high. Your work's literally reshaped our skies. Naomi smiled, but it was the kind that came from humility, not pride. Then let's make sure we never stop improving. Numbers can fall, but bias has a way of finding new doors to enter. After the meeting, a young flight attendant approached her shyly. She was barely 25, with nervous eyes and a crisp uniform. Dr. Brooks, she said softly, I just wanted to thank you. Before the Grace Standard, people like me didn't think we could speak up. Now, if someone crosses a line, we know the system listens. You made that possible. Naomi's eyes warmed. No, she said gently. You did. Every time you choose integrity over silence, you make the sky safer. The girl smiled, tears glimmering, before walking away. Naomi stood for a long moment, breathing in the quiet sense of purpose that never quite left her. That evening, at home, Elijah sat on the porch reading as Naomi rocked Grace to sleep. The cicadas buzzed softly in the Georgia air. Naomi looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and whispered, You have no idea how much you've already changed the world. When Grace finally drifted off, Naomi joined Elijah outside. He handed her a glass of iced tea. Long day. She smiled faintly. A full one. But it's good. They're listening now. He looked at her, eyes soft with admiration. You turned a wound into a blueprint. She leaned back in her chair. Maybe pain's just purpose that hasn't found its shape yet. They sat in silence for a while, the night wrapping around them. A soft breeze carried the faint sound of an airplane overhead. Naomi tilted her head up, watching the blinking lights trail across the stars. Every time I hear that, she said, I think about how one moment one slap started all of this. Sometimes it feels like it happened to someone else." Elijah's voice was low. "It happened to us, but it doesn't define us." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Do you ever think about her, Lindsay?" He nodded slowly. "Sometimes. She teaches at a community center in Chicago now. Helps people coming out of prison find jobs. I heard she's good at it." Naomi smiled faintly. "Maybe that's grace working in ways we don't see." A pause. Then she whispered, "I forgave her. You know, not for her. For me." "I know," he said softly. "That's what makes you extraordinary." Months later, Naomi was invited to give a commencement speech at Howard University, her alma mater. Standing on that stage, looking out over hundreds of bright young faces, she felt the full circle of her journey. "When I was your age," she began, "I thought strength meant keeping quiet, smiling through disrespect, earning acceptance instead of demanding it. But then one day, a stranger's hand across my face taught me something that no degree ever could, that silence can be as dangerous as violence." The crowd was utterly still. Naomi's voice carried, calm yet resonant. "The world will tell you that dignity is something you have to earn. Don't believe it. You're born with it. And the moment you stop defending it, someone else decides your worth. Never let that happen." The audience erupted in applause. Many wiped tears as they stood, clapping until her name echoed through the auditorium. Afterward, students lined up to meet her. One young man, tall and nervous, handed her a letter. "Dr. Brooks," he said, "my mom was on that flight. She told me you changed her life. I just wanted to thank you." Naomi opened the letter that night in her hotel room. It was written in a shaky hand. "You reminded me that staying silent doesn't make you safe, it just keeps you small. I decided to go back to school. Thank you for teaching me courage." She pressed the paper to her heart. The tears that came were not of sadness but gratitude. As the years passed, the Grace Foundation expanded beyond aviation. It began advocating for workplace equality, public service reform, and education equity. Naomi's name became synonymous with dignity, not because she demanded it, but because she embodied it. Yet fame never changed her rhythm. She still woke early, made breakfast for Grace, walked barefoot in the garden with Elijah on Sundays. The world outside called her an icon, but inside their home, she was simply Mom. One quiet evening, as Grace practiced piano, Elijah called her to the porch. "There's someone here to see you." Naomi stepped outside to find Lindsay Cooper standing at the gate. Older now, her eyes humble but bright. Naomi hesitated, surprised. Lindsay nodded, clutching a small folder. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." Naomi took a slow breath, then smiled gently. "I didn't expect to, but I think maybe I do." Lindsay approached, her voice trembling. "I came to return something." She opened the folder and pulled out an old boarding pass, creased and faded. "I found it while cleaning out my things from that day. I thought you might want it, or maybe you'd want to burn it." Naomi looked at it for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No, I'll keep it. To remember how far we've both flown." Lindsay's eyes welled up. "I can't ever undo what I did." "No," Naomi said softly. "But you've already done something better. You changed." They stood in silence. Two women bound by a past neither had chosen, but both had transformed. Before leaving, Lindsay turned back. "You know, I thought forgiveness would feel like weakness, but standing here, I realize it's the strongest thing anyone can give." Naomi smiled faintly. "It's what makes us human." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Naomi felt a peace she hadn't known in years. That night, after tucking Grace into bed, She found Elijah on the balcony, reading under the soft light of a single lamp. He looked up as she joined him. "You okay?" She nodded. "Better than okay." He set the book aside, taking her hand. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Naomi smiled. "No. Tell me. You took something ugly and turned it into flight. You turned anger into empathy, power into purpose." She leaned against him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe that's what grace really is, not forgiveness, not fame, but the courage to turn pain into something beautiful." He kissed her forehead. "You did that." Below them, city lights flickered like constellations, and somewhere above, a plane traced its path across the night sky. Naomi watched it, her reflection merging with the stars in the glass. The world was still imperfect, still heavy with unlearned lessons, but for the first time, she truly believed it could change. Not because of laws or headlines, but because one act of dignity had proven that even the smallest voice could echo beyond the clouds. She whispered into the quiet night, "Fly safe, whoever you are, fly free." And the world, in its vast, flawed beauty, seemed to whisper back. The story of Naomi Brooks reminds us that true strength isn't measured by how loud we respond to injustice, but by how deeply we choose to stay human when others forget to be. Her quiet courage turned humiliation into healing, and personal pain into systemic change. In a world where prejudice still hides behind uniforms and polite smiles, Naomi's response teaches us something timeless. Anger burns fast, but dignity endures. When she refused to fight hate with hate, she didn't just win justice for herself, she restored faith for countless others watching in silence. For older generations, this story echoes the lessons many have lived, that respect must be defended, but never at the cost of our peace. We may not all stand in a courtroom or on a plane, but we all face moments when the world asks who we are. And in those moments, may we choose what Naomi chose: grace, courage, and the unshakable belief that doing right is its own kind of victory. Thank you for watching and walking with us through this journey of dignity, courage, and redemption. Stories like Naomi's remind us that one act of strength can ripple far beyond the moment it's born. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps these voices of justice reach someone who might need them most. Together, let's keep telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind the world that humanity still matters. See you in the next story where grace meets courage once again.